to see, we all want to be real, and we're searching when we're finding, we all want to
Hi.
Hi, Maria.
Hello, welcome.
Hi. Sorry about getting the time wrong. I used a conversion table and clearly it was wrong.
It's
Oh,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
Well,
awesome.
here we are now anyway, isn't it? So that's the main thing.
absolutely. Busy day for all of us. How was yours so far?
Yeah, it's been good. Quite quite warm in England at the moment, despite being winter.
Yeah, very strange year here, all around Europe, as far as I see as well. Very
Yep,
warm
and in the
winter.
US it's very warm still.
And you're
Maybe
based in Lithuania, are you?
Yeah, I am.
Christina is, and I'm like an hour south of Boston on the East Coast.
Wow.
Yeah,
We
so we always have three times to coordinate, so it happens quite a lot that we that we
Yeah.
miss an hour and wait that hour or so. So, but we're glad that you're here now.
Yes, glad to be here.
Yeah, okay, so I will just give introduction for Maria. Maria, thank you once again for joining us tonight in our radio show. It's a huge pleasure to talk to you and share your wisdom and works with our listeners. And I have no doubt that today we're gonna have amazing show exploring the investigations you did. And your investigations, presentations are really spectacular. We've learned a lot from them. And the most beautiful is the passion and love you put into your research and studies. And they are very inspiring. And also and also the information you share is very crucial to our today's society to finally understand and remember our own long forgotten past and rise above the mainstream left brain perspective. And doing so, of course, with all this knowledge, we can know ourselves better and we can change our world from destruction faster. And another thing which is very, very beautiful that you, Maria, you bring new, very deep, intuitive, wise, and observational energy of feminine to the world of archaeology, dowsing, science, and many other things. And it shows us how the sacred feminine rises these days and helps us to remember all our forgotten roots and bring that past to the future and just to remember our divinity. So for all of our listeners, just I am strongly recommending to go and to investigate Maria's work at her page, which is the aveburyexperience.co.uk. There you can find many links and also links to her books and tours and many other beautiful things. So please don't miss that chance. So Maria, first of all, maybe you can share your current works, your recent discoveries in your fields, and what are you doing now? And maybe you have some tours or some future plans very soon.
Yes, well, at the moment, it's quite exciting times, really, because I believe that if you can utilize quite a few skills, like I'm a dowser and I'm into past life regression as well, and if you can utilize different disciplines like that, I believe it leads to new discoveries. And one of those new discoveries I had recently was at Stonehenge by finding the elongated skulls of our long lost ancestors who
Wow.
were clearly residing in the Stonehenge area, and they looked very different to our skulls, which are quite round and quite European looking. So I was down and discovered that. I do tours as well and a lot of workshops, and I'm just about to launch an esoteric college, hopefully in January and February, where it will be fully online courses in dowsing, past life regression, and other esoteric disciplines.
Beautiful. Well, we will dwell into the elongated skulls in a few moments, but for the beginning, maybe you can share your story and how your interest grew in the field of science and the things you're working now. Also, we know that you have some very huge influence of your father. Father influenced you and taught you many things. So, how that interest grew, and also how you were able to embed that spiritual point of view towards that science together to work together.
Sure. Well, yes, I'm a second generation dowser, and my late father was considered the UK's top master dowser. And he himself inherited a lot of papers and techniques. and Earth energy surveys and archaeological surveys from another master dowser called Guy Underwood. So that was 80 years of looking into the energies of the Earth by these two master dowsers, and I inherited that. I also have worked with colleagues of the family, which were Chinese geomants and European master dowsers as well. So I like to think that I bridge the east and west ways of doing geomancy, um, and I'm inspired as well by people that really want to look into how to live in harmony with the earth. So for me, it was a lifetime of study, a lot of which was inherited from my father. But even now we're making new breakthroughs all of the while. So it has been a wonderful journey, and I feel very fortunate in that. I've always been a person that asks a lot of questions. I'm not a believer in anything.
Hmm.
I strive to understand something. So when, for example, my late father said, "Oh, standing stones have energy bands. They transmit electromagnetic energy. You can get them through dowsing." Yes, I could. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, I could feel the energy with my hands. But we also decided, or about sort of 10 years ago, to investigate it using scientific instrumentation to try and prove it one way or the other. And actually, we were fortunate enough to be able to prove it. The standing stones of Avebury and Stonehenge elsewhere do transmit electromagnetic signals to one another. So I feel that science can help us understand the intuitive side of our nature, mainly to give a wider perspective to non-believers and believers alike, to say, look, something real is going on that has been noted for millennia by our ancient
Mm,
ancestors.
Yeah.
absolutely. And this whole field of geomancy has absolute everything to do with the term of ley lines. And you do that in your presentations, you talk about it. And just quickly for our listeners, a little bit about the etymology of the names and traditions there in the history of ley lines.
Well, yes, ley lines are straight lines that link ancient sites to one another, which our ancient ancestors mapped out and sited ancient sites upon these power lines. Think of leys as, big rivers of energy really flowing through the landscape. Put an ancient site, a pyramid, a stone circle upon these leys, and it breathes life and power into them, and they can start to transmit a form of free energy on some levels. So some leys are just straight lines across the landscape, linking sacred sites to one another. Then you get complex ley systems that can link to the planets above. And I discovered one of those lays. So, for example, you have a straight line with ancient sites upon them, and those ancient sites represent a planet in the solar system that links to that energetically. So there are many different types of lays. Some are aligned to solar events like the summer solstice, some are aligned to lunar events like the moon's botonic cycle, and some, like I said earlier, linked to the planets. So there's many different types of lays, and there's grid systems as well.
Yeah, interesting. And how long back ago we noticed people knowing ley lines existed in the traditions, myths, and the architecture?
Thousands and thousands of years. I mean, when we look to the ancient sites that have survived the passage of time, like Stonehenge and the pyramids, clearly it was about 5,000 years ago. But when you kind of do the archaeology on some of these sites, they have earlier activity of what's called the Mesolithic period, which is 10,000 years ago. So I think this timeline stretches way, way, way back into time. And that's what we need to discover. Who were these ancient first people that linked in this system to the lays and to the grid network?
Hmm. And we know also from more recent times, that buildings like lighthouses and whatnot, towers and turrets, were erected on these points, crossing ley lines or just along the ley lines. And also in World War II, in Nazi Germany, the military was actually really interested in everything occult, and especially ley lines. And also I think Himmler was big into dowsing, and he even dowsed over maps. Is that right?
Yes, Himmler founded a Dowsing Academy in Munich. So he was very investigating this discipline. He also, one of the first things that he did when they invaded Poland was cordon off a stone circle complex there and made it into a kind of occult shrine. Um, their investigation into dowsing, I probably think intuitively was probably the best in the world. But when the Allies came in on their laboratories, they burnt them down. So we have, but they did claim that they found the X factor, whatever that is,
Hmm.
linking into to dowsing. So I think they were very investigated the discipline. But even without that, there are modern day alignments upon grids and lay systems. CERN is one, the particle accelerator. So modern day alignments do still feed into the grid systems.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and our friends like Kurt Lindahl, Robert Homrich, they do investigation. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with them, but they are just investigating the Washington, D.C. and the Vatican and the London, and how those cities are also just aligned to those ley lines, and how they are learning from that ancient knowledge too.
Yes, they are, and the city of London and indeed the Vatican and Washington. Not only are they on lays, and they're the transmitters of energy. Yeah, they're the currents that flow. They're also aligned upon huge areas of underground water. That is quite a special type of water, actually. So it is of no surprise that the City of London, which is a financial centre, well, you could call it a global financial centre, that it's under this underground water because in ancient China, water and money were very similar. So the word meant wealth, growth. And water to the ancient Chinese was very important when it comes to money and finance. So they used to place fish in tanks by cash registers, linking in. That's where the English word currency comes from. It's the current that flows in the underground waters or the surface waters. So the City of London is under a vast amount of very special water.
Hmm.
And that feeds into the ley system. The ley system by itself, it's like anything. An electrical circuit it needs to feed off something, doesn't it? Whether it's the power lines coming down to light up your home. It's a bit like that with the ley system. It needs to get the energy, and the energy can in part come from the line, but it also comes from the earth energies that can feed and boost into that system as well. There's no separation between a ley and earth energy, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, in your presentations, you also talk about the Geneva and how that place is also deeply into ley line systems, a place where modern society makes lots of decisions. So that's also interesting.
That's right. When it comes to Geneva and other places that have, political power and weight, they do tend to be on these ley systems and earth energies as well, and the underground water. You start putting those three elements together, and you have a dynamic recipe. Have one by itself, and you've got a pretty good recipe, but you haven't got the full strength and the power of the earth. And from the medieval Masons times right the way through to Victorian mystery schools and people today, they're fully aware of how you need more than one element.
Yeah.
Hmm. And how could you, I mean, that now that we know the ingredients, I mean, how can we recapture that and make that manifest in something else than, currency that manifests as money and banks, sides of the river that, you know, manifest as actual banks as we know it. How can we recapture our Mother Earth here?
I feel one way that we can do that is we can form a very deep relationship with the earth and with the earth energies, which is like the energetic nature of Gaia. And if even on new building programs or old building programs, if we then start to read the frequencies of the earth, read what's there in the land, then we can adapt accordingly. I mean, for example, there is one grid system that quite often gets mistaken for a ley, easily done because both are straight lines and transmitting energy. But one particular grid system, which comes in at a particular angle, east of north, so it's very easy to identify, has been known to the medieval masons, for example, that its crossing point in churches is a really good place to put what we call in England the pulpit. That's where the priest or the vicar would speak from, because you can start to channel and communicate better. It enhances your ability to communicate.
Hmm.
Now, put that into
Did we lose you?
our wealth and our physical well-being. So if we could live above these areas as did our ancient ancestors, we would be healthier, and I feel more positive, more connected, feeling a part of one another and not disconnected from one another and disconnected from the earth. No, so when we build on these places that emit these types of earth energies, it's really about connecting to the earth. Because today, so many people are disconnected. They're disconnected from one another, they're disconnected from where they live. And it's almost as well, there's like a lack of respect. You know, a home can be a very sacred place. You don't need to have to go to Stonehenge or Avebury. We can start to incorporate, if we have earth energies in our house, now a lot of people have underground water and different types of earth energies, we can start to make these connections wherever we are on the planet, because I'm a firm believer that everywhere is sacred. And we can look to these special places and then have building programs on them if that is permitted and that is wise to do, like hospital units and things. And we can help heal one another by just being in the right place on planet Earth. It's that easy and it's that simple.
Yeah, we have to listen to our intuition, and it brings us to the place we have to be.
Exactly. I mean, we can listen to our inner sense, and people know what's good for them. I mean, everybody has that sense where you go into a room and people have been arguing, and we say in England, "Oh, you can cut the atmosphere with a knife." We all have, and in a quiet moment, if we have that sense of just reconnecting to the earth, we know good places and we know bad places. And if we look to the animals especially, because animals know, they haven't had that disconnect from the earth, they're constantly on the earth and they feel our earth mother's pulse and its beat. So if we just look to where animals gather, for example, cows and sheep, they tend to look for good places to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an ancient saying in England, build your farm where the sheep doth lie, because the sheep will always lie in a good position overnight. So we can look for many different signs and symbols, and as well as using our intuition, let's look to the animal kingdom as well.
Yeah, and how animals react near such places like, in UK, like Stonehenge and other places, how animals react in your experience?
When it's a really big power place like Stonehenge, which is, it's like driving in sixth or seventh gear, it's a real power place. Then some animals will like that, and some will shy away from that. There was an experiment done at a stone circle in Oxfordshire in the UK called the Rollright Ring, where animals were taken into certain stones, and they shied away from some stones and went closer to the others. And it was found, after much experimentation, that those stones were releasing ultrasound out into the landscape as if irrigating the land in sonic frequencies and sound. So maybe the animals can hear the frequencies that stones emit, and some animals will like that and some will shy away from it. I mean, you cannot dispute instrumentation. The instruments were saying they are releasing across the landscape sonic sounds.
Hmm. And also, if we look at wild animals, you know, they roam free, and there is no frontiers for them. There's no borders for them anywhere. So I think really important for humanity as well is to regain our freedom of travel, freedom to travel freely, you know, to be able to go where our heart longs to be. That maybe is a real important thing here to consider.
I think that is a wonderful statement that you have just given. I mean, that it really resonates with me. Yes, exactly. Animals roam free, and we need that. We need that, don't we? We need that ability to go to different parts of the earth and to feel the different types of energies, because each country has its own persona and frequencies.
Right, and we sit in front of the computer and you know look maybe up certain places that we know we want to go. You know, it's there. It's really a strong pull that you can feel when you look at certain pictures, for example. And so you know it's just horrible that you don't have the cash in the account to just you know leave
Yeah.
your job and travel around for 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 a few years. But I think that actually has to happen, you know, and it's getting really torn down with recent events like you know the refugee crisis where it's a man-made migration, you know, a forced migration rather than a free migration. And but all that is pointing to strengthen, you know, the borders and restricting us to travel freely more and more. So that's really frustrating in a sense. And I think we just gotta do it. We just gotta keep traveling and just do it somehow.
I agree, and I really do feel, once we kind of make a connection to, a foreign land that we're traveling to, we do learn so much, because I feel that the ancient ancestors were tapping into different energies in different countries, and I'm hoping to go to Bulgaria in 2016 to do some teaching over there of some courses. And it came to my attention through one of my dowsing students who's from Bulgaria that they have such sacred waters over there. It's a land of sacred water. So we could, learn so much, because all of that water, for example, in those springs in Bulgaria, all springs anywhere, come to that, comes up out of the earth, mineral rich, but also that's on a physical level. But on a metaphysical level, it's coming up with a lot of information about the history of the planet, because water has memory. Any homeopath would tell you that. And that's what makes homeopathy work, for example. So if we think that all of these places that are intimately associated with surface water or underground water are places where we can tap into and go back into the past. It's like the Earth's Akashic records. So on a metaphysical level, lots of things are going on.
Hmm. And then what happens above ground, if there's underground water, we have these energies which are, you know, somewhat measurable. And maybe we can go a little bit into colors here, because that is really another field of your investigation. And we see colors in use a lot, of course, in advertising, of course. In every national flag consists of these colors, and you know dominant is the white and red, for example. If you look, we always have white and red. And I think I'm just tapping into your research here, so I'll hand it over to you and talk a little bit about the colors.
Well, yes, a lot of people think of lays as just straight lines and maybe lines of light, for example, you know. But what Earth energy has, just like the light that is emitted from the sun, it has an electromagnetic color spectrum. So, for example, it has all of the colors from the reds to the violets, just like the electromagnetic spectrum. What it also has are some invisible colors. It has an invisible color of ultraviolet that bees can see, for example, and infrared, and
Hmm.
another frequency called negative green. And negative green, which is, it can be positive and negative. It was just called that in the 1930s by two French European master dowsers that investigated it. Is the most powerful form of Earth energy released by Gaia. I mean, when it was being investigated in the 1930s by the two French dowsers, what they were looking for was how can we raise this frequency to a higher strength? It didn't really need it, but you know, scientific minds like to experiment, and that's what they're good at. So one of them went to the laboratory to raise the frequency of the negative green, and he was found 1 week later completely mummified in the laboratory. He raised the frequency so strongly, and that now is, you know, dowsing, a big dowsing statement to say, you know, some of the frequencies of Mother Earth, maybe we need to understand that their sacredness before we go trying to, you know, raise or lower them like it's a nuclear bomb or something. These energies are very, very strong. So
Hmm.
let's now have a new look at the old ley. So we need to think of these energies, these ley lines and earth currents and underground water will give off color frequencies, and they tend to have a dominant color that they will release, like a dominant color of blue, for example, and that will add yet another ambiance and layer of understanding about the Earth frequency and the location by reading its color, which is very easy to do.
Is that why it's the blue planet?
Well, Gaia is blue and green. That's her kind of, you know, main frequencies. And then you mentioned, you know, flags and countries, and they will go for dominant colors that they want to control and enhance as well. And you know, in Nazi Germany, it was red and white, and they looked for the red and the white frequencies in the ground as well. That's the energy system that they were tapping into. It's incredibly strong. It represents, red and white can represent the warrior and give strength to the warrior. Blue, for example, is a little bit, you know, more calmer and would represent more of priesthood. And have the wisdom of the priesthood behind it is all steeped in deep symbolism. But we need to think, you know, if we have an energy current going through a house, it can imbue it with unseen colors, and that's the strength behind the ley. It's literally an invisible rainbow world of Earth energy.
Yeah. Also very interesting. You talked about the negative green and also the power of it, and also our, core of ours is the heart, and heart is the green chakra as well, and also the Leo in astrology. So again, we have that negative green in the core of ours in the heart. So, and also we just did the investigation with Stefan, and we see that Leo backwards is O, E, and L, also spells like oil. So we have that Leo, which represents courage, brave, brave, things as well. But also we have that oil which we extract from the planet Earth, that dark oil or petroleum, so to speak, with which we can just pollute our planet and just make bad things to and damage to the planet. So
Yeah.
those two things, and also the heart, the middle of ours and the core of ours.
And of course, that's connected with blood, if I may jump in there. And one color that I wanted to add to the red and white of Nazi Germany was black. That also was used more as the actual color that makes the signs and sigils and whatnot. So the acting color. And interesting also is if you look at black and red, it's both colors also for blood. Dead blood gets black also, and you have Grimm's story where it's white as snow and red like blood and black like ebony. So you have that connection to the earth and the water there as well. I just wanted to add that color to the mix here.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and clearly understood on an esoteric level by the leaders therein. I think as well, we can really tap into the positive energies and the positive understanding of the earth colors, because it's believed in esoteric dowsing that, I'm sure that you're aware that we have our chakra system, and a lot of people say the base chakra is red, and you mentioned the heart chakra being green. And in esoteric dowsing, the chakras have all of the colors in them, but the dominant color for the base chakra for it to open is red.
Right.
And some dowsers believe that it's negative green that is the cause and could be the cure of things like cancer, imbalances, a disease. So it's looking at light and color as all of the colors with one dominating. That's how esoteric dowsers see that.
And I guess that would translate into a frequency uh, of some sort that also can translate in the frequency of water. So, color and water, how does that work together? Is it
Well, color in water can be on the physical level. For example, if you color divined water, and let's say for argument's sake it came out red, on a physical level, that's probably because it's got iron-rich minerals in it, for example. And copper can come out a green color, silver would come out white, and so on. But on a metaphysical level, that would always say for red, it would be more energizing type of water, and blue
hmm,
would be a more calming type of water, and that's simply put, but it puts the concept out there. Different color frequencies will influence people and all living
hmm.
organisms in particular ways.
And of course water and color would be a reflection of the color. Now it's maybe with if you combine it with dowsing maybe and the occult maybe into a direction of scrying where you try to use these kind of energies, uh, colors and forces and intent and thoughts to see things in the water right before you in the reflection.
Yes, I mean, you can, scry and have a form of divination of all of the four elements, and water is no exception at all. But there is a side to water, especially water that has been in the earth and comes out as surface water, like its springs and, those sacred places. In the ground. It's if we need to look at it as it has consciousness. It is sentient. So it will remember your energy field, for example. And even though you might think, well, that's impossible because I'm at a spring and now it's flowing down the river. How can that be? But it's almost like, the molecules, even if you say anything to water, it will memorize that. But it memorizes you as well. So, and water is like a massive family. So one water in one part of the world will eventually link into the other. It's fluid. There is no separation with it on particular levels. So how we interact with the water that we drink from our taps, the water in our body, it's all very, very important, and especially where water comes out of the ground.
Yeah.
Wow.
And also there are lots of crop circles in the UK especially, and also, you mentioned those esoteric centers in the middle of the sites which are correlating to the underground water. And you mentioned that also those crop circles usually appear not very far away from those ancient sites. So maybe that's also how that, those shapes are correlating to the water, and maybe water is shaping, the crops. Or what is your point of view towards that?
It's very interesting that the crop circles appear in where I live. Actually, I live in the heart of megalithic countryside. I'm not far from Avebury or Stonehenge, and I'm not far from whenever crop circles manifest. There is an investigator called Francine Blake. She's from France and she lives in the UK. She's a very knowledgeable lady about crop circles, and she's been investigating them for many, many years. And when I think she took a water sample at a crop circle. It was in a bottle of water, and then it was put under a very strong microscope, the water, and in all of the water droplets was the mirror image of the pattern of the crop circle. So that water memorized the shape of the crop circle. I feel, crop circles are related to Gaia and to ourselves, our own consciousness. I think everything is interactive, you see. I don't see it as a separation. So if, for example, mankind would need a healing symbol, and the world needs that at the moment, I would like to think that, the earth could help manifest that through the crop circles so that we can change our consciousness in some way. I've been around the crop circles and ancient sites for many, many decades now. And one thing I've noticed, I started going into crop circles, as a teenager and dousing them with my late father. And it made a movement. It made people think outside of their everyday life. These ancient sites and crop circles take you away from the ordinary into the extraordinary. And suddenly you realize that there's something far beyond the 3D realm. And crop circles certainly did that. They made some people come awake into a new form of consciousness.
Yeah, and that's also interesting. You talked about the Adam's grave, that's a sacred site which is dedicated to Mercury, and also Mercury is like Merc, like waters, and Curie like cure something. So again, healing with water, curing with water. And also you mentioned that this site is usually the site around which crop circles occur very, very often. So what's your point towards that?
Well, that's right. There's a huge ley line that links Stonehenge with Avebury, and it goes beyond that, further south and further north up the country. And certain ancient sites were placed to align with certain planets around about 2700 BC. Everything came into alignment then. It must have been a wonderful part of man's history and experience on the planet. But Adam's grave, which is a massive long barrow, an ancient site that goes back 5,000 years ago, aligned to Mercury, and where the crop circles manifested, especially where they first came. They still come there now, but that was the first main area. It's called Eastfield, just beyond Adam's grave. Mercury, like you said, is all about communication, the written and the spoken word, and that's where people started to naturally channel and, celestial beings, earth beings, elementals. But again, it's like opening up, the kind of sacred esoteric throat chakra, not just your, I'm speaking now and I'm being mercurial, But there's also a side to us where, again, you go down a bit deeper, and it's like an esoteric awakening, and you start to speak on different levels. I really do feel once you have that planetary input in the landscape through linking it to the heavens above and having an ancient site on there, they're earth gates. They're like portals that we can go through, and we can work with those energies to better our human race, and to better our understanding of Gaia's place in the solar system as well. And I think these areas become like gateways for like planetary energies to come in as well. So it's like astrological gateways as well. There is so much research out there that we can look into, and hopefully gain even more understanding as the years tick by.
Yeah, maybe you can share some more information on the Druid temples of the county of Wilts, those Stonehenge, Silbury Hill, and how they are correlating to the planets, and when that discovery was found that those sites are just aligned to those sites.
Well, yes. I mean, the first documentation of the ley line linking into the ancient sites, which I'll describe in a moment, was done by the Reverend Edward Duke in the 1800s. That was the first documentation of it, and what he saw, he probably got that from an occult library. Because even though he's a reverend, a lot of the reverends in England were the ones that looked into the pagan past and, investigated the ancient sites. So that was the first documentation. And he saw a ley line with the ancient sites on it, and these massive circles, which represented the planetary orbit of that, the orbit of the planet, rather. So what he did, he went out and investigated them, and what he found was that on the map it said Stonehenge represented Saturn, and a huge Druidic ceremonial center of the Iron Age represented Jupiter. And for example, Avebury, which contains the world's largest stone circle, represented the sun and the moon. And Silbury Hill, which is the largest man-made mound in Europe, represented the planet Earth. And there were other planets as well, like we mentioned, Mercury with Adam's grave and a beautiful stone circle that sadly got demolished in the 1800s, would represent Venus. So there we have all of the planets represented on the ground with these ancient sites. And when I investigated that with an astronomer, we suddenly noticed that it was laid out using the mean distance from the planet Earth to that planet. I mean, that's extraordinary astronomical, mathematical awareness of our ancient ancestors. So they laid it out like it is in the heavens. They brought heaven to earth.
Yeah, I also mentioned that Venus temple was demolished, so maybe again the correlation how they demolished that feminine energy on planet Earth. So that's, even if we look at the current society and how we are treating the feminine, divine feminine, so it's also just talking about that demolishing energy.
That is such a good point. It really, really is, because it was one of the first ancient sites to be destroyed. And the villagers that lived there, it was just a tiny village surrounded by this beautiful ancient site. They were in tears. It's documented that they were crying. They did not want that to happen. When we look to other ancient sites nearby, like Avebury Henge, Avebury has a massive stone circle of 100 standing stones, creating a gigantic stone circle, inside of which you have two other stone circles, one said to be masculine, Temple of the Sun, and the other one is said to be feminine, and Temple of the Moon. And it will come as no surprise to you that the first circle to be demolished within that sacred temple was the Temple of the Moon, destroying the divine feminine, the strength and the power and the beauty.
Wow.
Yeah. And about the Mars temple as well, the site of the Mars, they're also you said that they are building the military, organizations around that. So that's also.
Well, yes, ancient sites in England, the really powerful ones like Stonehenge, like Mardenhenge, which was the temple of Mars in this sacred ceremonial landscape, are very, very close to what we call the Salisbury Plain. And the Salisbury Plain is a large area that is managed and run by the Military of Defence, MOD. And on that land, you have thousands of ancient sites, about 2,000 in that
Wow.
area of Salisbury Plain alone. And you just, some tracks on the Salisbury Plain you can have access to, others you can't. It's off limits. This is the military land. You
Yeah.
can't just wander around. So it's very interesting that Stonehenge is surrounded by military complex after military complex, including Porton Down Nuclear Biological Centre. Again, cannot be coincidental. That Nuclear Biological Centre is on a lay that goes right to the heart of Stonehenge.
Wow. And you also talk that Stonehenge is like a Saturn as well. Saturn is Kronos, Kronos is time. And you also mentioned that, maybe Stonehenge was maybe some time machine. So maybe their military are just interested how to use those particular energies of Stonehenge to profit.
I agree, and I think that is correct. I mean, there has been reports of military personnel because there's army barracks a mile and a half away from Stonehenge. You have large army barracks called Lark Hill. And there were some two guys from the army. They were just chilling out by Stonehenge on a track in a car, having a few cigarettes and having a few drinks. They weren't drunk, but they'd had a few drinks, and they were just chilling out and chatting. And one noticed, I think, if my memory serves me correct, it was like an amber-colored light. And they thought, oh, where did that come from? And they can triangulate, they can work things out. They're trained observers, military personnel. So they were trying to figure it out and thought, well, no, we can't. It seems impossible that the light can go from here to here. Well, they went back to their barracks and they were met by the military police, and they were thinking, what the hell is going on? And one started to scratch and rub his chin and realized he had growth, and they got arrested because they'd been absent without leave for a few days, and that they noticed no time distortion from their perspective. So there is that energy that is in the land around Stonehenge, and I think that story has great significance. And a woman whose name doesn't want to be mentioned, she also had a time-lapse experience around Stonehenge as well. So it could be a gigantic portal or energy zone which can allow time to change.
Wow.
Hmm. And of course, the stones have something to do with that energy. And you also talk about the activation of the stones in your presentations and why we can't touch the stones.
It's my personal belief that from 2010 leading up to 2012, Stonehenge was coming back into its power. Now, I can say that because I have been going into Stonehenge with groups, working with these energies since the 80s when my late father used to take people in. I was always present. So I've kind of learned how the stones of Stonehenge feel energetically through dowsing, through my hands, and through just being there, and through talking to other people about their own experiences and what they felt as well. And around about 2010, it was almost like it was a wow. You could really feel the energies coming off the stones. And I went in there to lead a big tour for a conference in 2012. It might have been just the year before that, actually. And all of a sudden, the guards were saying, because Stonehenge has security guards, you can only get private access to go into the center of the stone. It's off limits to the general public normally, but you can pay for private access. But even on private access, when you used to be able to touch the stones, after it came into its power, you could no longer touch the stones. And I think that is a deliberate move by the powers that be to stop us interacting with the energy. One thing I noticed about what people were saying on that day when we felt it coming into power, people were saying, "Oh, I'm getting a real good." Sensitive people were saying, "I'm getting a glimpse of the ancient past." It was like they were having downloads. So maybe that has something to do with it. I didn't experience a download at that time, but I have experienced when I've interacted with the stones at Stonehenge, glimpses of the past. So yes, so I do feel that it's off limits now. You can't even touch the stones, and it's a disgrace because this was left to the British people. This is our spiritual heritage. It's everybody's spiritual heritage now. We're a global village. We're mankind, we're humanity, we're one family, and to be denied access to an ancient site like that is unbelievable.
Yeah, people are waking up, and the system is afraid of the connection to the nature again. So yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. And you also talk about frequency and acoustic, and that in connection with stones, and how some people experienced some uh, weight loss of the stones of themselves.
That's right. The a standing stone, if you root it into an earth energy pattern, which underground water can make a spiral pattern or concentric circles, or if you root a standing stone into a ley line or an earth current energy, let's just use the collective word earth energy for a moment, and you put that standing stone into that earth energy, it starts to behave in a particular manner. So it can literally kind of through its crystal matrix structure, because a lot of stones are silicon, just like silicon chips from Silicon Valley, they can start to transmit that energy up through its crystal matrix and start to transmit it. And you get 5 energy bands above the ground and 2 are below because the stone is rooted into the ground. So 7 energy bands in total. Now, the third energy band is very strange, and we did some experiments with weight at that on that energy band at Avebury Henge. With a stone that's in situ and hasn't been re-erected and reset in concrete. And it became apparent that it could somehow, I mean, we don't understand this at all, really, but it can start to manipulate your weight. It can make some people slightly heavier, and it can make some people slightly lighter in their weight when they're interacting and touching that energy band. Obviously, when they go back and they leave that energy band, one's weight comes back to its normal, correct pounds and stones. So your weight will come back to its what you are naturally. So
Hmm.
something is really interesting is happening there. Is it the stone that's causing the weightlessness? Did our ancient ancestors become aware that this one point in the stone can manipulate weight, so they could use that manipulation to move the standing stones across the landscape? Uh, with this is again, it's an area of research and investigation that we really, really need to look into, and we need better equipment to do
Hmm.
that as well,
Yeah.
because it's all down to state of the art equipment, and once you get something like that, you need experts that can help unsolve these mysteries.
Right, it really begs the question, what really is that energy that we're talking about, you know? Is it and what measures it, and how can we make sense of this? Is it like orgone energy that we know from people like Wilhelm Reich, who work with that positive and negative orgone energy? What do you think that energy actually is?
I think, yeah, orgone energy is released by some mound shapes in this area like Silbury Hill. I think that is definitely releasing orgone because it's made in the layering system that is typical of how orgone energy is generated through an organic layer, then an inorganic layer, an organic layer, etc. But I think some other earth energies and points emit different types of energy. Some are related to negative ions, for example, and you'll get like outpourings, almost like sort of springs of energy coming out that's full of negative ions. Then in another respect, at some ancient sites, certainly there was a place associated to Avebury called the Sanctuary. It was once a concentric stone circle on top of Overton Hill, about 1.5 miles, three or so kilometres away from Avebury, but a part of it was linked with the Stone Avenue. In the centre of that stone circle, the sanctuary, which today, incidentally, is marked by concrete blocks because sadly all the stones were removed. But all the stones were removed, there's just concrete markers there. And when we decided to do some radiation tests, what we got was, using a Geiger counter, a very expensive Geiger counter as well, from the center you have really high levels of gamma radiation. You go outside of the stone circle just by a few centimeters and everything goes back to normal. So you have this anomaly of this radiation release of gamma radiation, which is, it can be quite destructive to the physical body. It can break down your cells, and cancers can develop. So what were our ancient ancestors up to there? Why were they placing a stone circle over gamma radiation? Could they somehow manipulate that energy, making it sort of positive? I really don't know, but that's what our instrumentation gave.
Wow.
Yeah. And are you familiar with dolmens? Because, we know that in UK we have lots of dolmens, and also we have in Russia. And even recently it was discovered that one dolmen is found also near New York City as well in the US. And Hugh Newman just did that investigation. So what do you think about dolmens? Maybe there were some just, I don't know, communication buildings to communicate through the lands. What are your point of view towards that?
Well, when we look to dolmen distribution on a worldwide level, yes, you've got that large dolmen in New York that has been known for centuries. It's been widely documented. When you come to have a collection of them, then you're looking to South Korea, where you have thousands and thousands of dolmens in one area. So that's the dolmen capital of the world. And the dolmens were a global monument. You can get them in Syria and in parts of Pakistan, in Spain, in France. They're all over the world. And what their main purpose was for, I feel, is yet to be fully discovered. One thing that's constantly muted from researchers who haven't really researched into it at all, they just say, oh, it's all about fertility. It's all about, making the planet more fertile. But the planet was and is left to her own devices rather than using agricultural stimulants like nitrogen for growth. But these areas were always known to be fertile. I think there is something far, far more complex going on with dolmens than just raising and enhancing Earth's fertility.
Yeah,
I think it's yet to be discovered. We're looking into that at the moment. So in the future, I think we'll be able to have a better understanding, and as other researchers look into it as well. But I don't think that is being looked into properly.
Yeah, people taking things too literally, if talking about fertility and all those things. Maybe the fertility for the creativity, because when I can only just look at the picture of, for example, Russian dolmens, and I have lots of ideas, and especially that's very important for me. Like I am an artist, and I have to look at that picture, and I can draw the drawings immediately after only seeing that stone. So maybe not fertility as the fertility of land, but fertility for the creativity.
Well, yes, And that's what I mean. We need to kind of look into people's experiences. We need to look into what the dolmens are like in South Korea. How do they compare to the UK? And really kind of have a wider understanding, looking at the wider picture rather than looking just at one or a few different types of dolmen. And also, the kind of underground rock under the ground that they're sited upon. Granite can influence, ancient sites a lot. Our ancient ancestors loved granite. They included it in the King's Chamber. They included them in some ancient sites in the UK. So the underlying ground can have a huge influence on ancient sites and where we live as well.
Yeah. Another question is, what was the most common stone, they were using, for example, in UK in the sites?
It depends whereabouts in the UK. For example, around Avebury and Stonehenge, the stones that they used, because there were deposits of them, were sarsen stone and stones for Stonehenge. There was two types. The blue stones from Pembrokeshire in Wales that were 170 miles away, and also sarsen stone. But when you go to other stone circles, for example, one called Stanton Drew in Somerset, which is the second largest stone circle in England, then that is a different type of stone. So yeah, different. And you have limestone used in the rollright ring, so it depends where it was to outcrops, although they did import different stones. So again, that all feeds into an energy system. It feeds into the ley systems and the grid lines, the different types of frequencies of the stones, and also the frequencies of the underground sentient conscious waters, and fill in the entire landscape with all of these colors and frequencies. It's truly incredible.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I know we mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but I'm kind of interested in the story of the elongated skull around Stonehenge and what the differences are to, of course, our skulls and other elongated skulls that were found.
Yes, the elongated skulls of Stonehenge are a fascinating subject, and I found, like I said earlier, I found them through Dowson, Map Dowson. They were very different to our skulls because they were much longer. So the people of Stonehenge, which I believe may have been the ruling elite or the priesthood, it was very difficult to say, were vastly different looking. You would have recognized them a bit like, Nefertiti's long head of Egyptian fame. She stands out from the crowd. Recognize these people instantly. They must have been the priesthood or the ruling elite, because the largest long mound ever to be constructed in northwest Europe is on Salisbury Plain. And normally these long barrows were used as to place burial deposits in. Not all of them, but some of them were. And it was normally like the skulls and the long bones were placed into these long barrows, and they were communal. So you'd have up to 50 skulls in one, for example, and lots of different bones. So they were communal. But the largest long barrow that I mentioned which is on Salisbury Plain, housed just one woman, and it's interesting that she was literally a woman, because hardly anybody speaks about the prehistoric women in the societies that were. They think it was males that made Stonehenge, and there's a lot of presupposing in England about who constructed Stonehenge, and it's never a woman's mentioned at all. So it's really amazing that the largest long mound was dedicated to this one woman, and she was murdered, and she had an elongated skull, very similar to her Egyptian counterparts, like I mentioned, like Nefertiti for for an example. So these people were probably seers or a queen, and they were certainly ruling Stonehenge. And it must have been round about the time of 2500 BC when the stone circle were coming into being and being constructed, that the elongated people seem to have been murdered in the Stonehenge environ. It was almost like a genocide took place, and all of these people perished. And the monuments that the elongated ones constructed were very elongated in shape, called the Cursus monument, for example. And standing in front of Stonehenge, long before the Stonehenge that you and I recognize was constructed, was a gigantic monument. It was nearly 2 miles long, and it had walls rising up 6, maybe even 10 feet high, with no entrance. What was that monument about? And it was long and it was elongated in shape. So the elongated people of Stonehenge created a lot of elongated monuments. And then when the rounder stone circles came into being, and the round barrows that some of those people got interred in, they were just for round skulled people. So you can look at a monument in the ancient landscape of England and easily determine if it was one that was created by the elongated ones because of by the look and the style, or by the more round skulls like we have today, because they were rounder monuments and round barrows. In fact, the early archaeologists, antiquarians, they coined a phrase, and it was absolutely fantastic. Long barrows, long skulls; round barrows, round skulls. And for some reason, modern day archaeologists literally shelved all of the information about the elongated skulls until a researcher like myself comes along and kind of starts to research it and saying, well, no, these were people. This is our untold history that is, in my opinion, being repressed.
Yeah, and we absolutely have to go and study that for ourselves. Christina and I had the chance to go to Egyptian Museum in Berlin this year, and we saw the elongated skull busts that they have of the daughters of Nefertiti, and of course Nefertiti is also in Berlin, which of course is also just a bust, and you can't see if there's an elongated skull or not, but you can see that she's wearing this, head where very well under that could be an elongated skull, and
Yeah.
then you just walk through and you see the picture, the busts of her daughters, and they have elongated skulls. So there's just another hint.
Well, exactly. In the timeline, if we apply a timeline, the people of Stonehenge predate the Egyptians as well. So by over 1,000 years or more, about 1,200 years. So they were in the Stonehenge environs, which they could have been in Egypt for that time frame as well. So a lot of the skulls that were taken from the long barrows that were elongated, they were put into places like the British Museum. They're catalogues. They're literally put into boxes. I went to visit one of them. I had to go through a lot of paperwork and permission seeking. And the massive warehouse where they're stored is phenomenal. I mean, it was a huge, long warehouse packed with boxes. The box saying Abydos as far as I could see.
Hold on, breaking up a
Yeah, I
little bit.
think we lost Maria.
Are you there?
Hello?
Oh,
Hello, do
here
you hear
she
us?
is. Okay. Yeah, that
Yep,
was just a little breaking up there.
right, okay. Sorry about that.
It's
Yeah.
okay. You were talking about the British museums and the elongated skulls.
Yes, there's so many finds in places like the British Museums from places like Egypt, because these boxes had Abydos written on them with the symbol for male or female, and there were hundreds of those. So I think, there's so much information stored away in the
Right.
museums that aren't being looked at by anybody.
Right, we're going into the museum and we just see what they really just show us, you know. If you just imagine what is in the back doors and the cellars of these buildings that
Yeah.
has been put away and is not accessible to the public, just look at the Smithsonian. They've admitted of holding back information, of course, and even destroying evidence, bones and whatnot. This is just too sad.
I think that's probably the case for the UK as well, to be truthful. I think it was, a lot of the information was destroyed. I mean, it's quite fortunate when it came to the elongated skulls. I got a lot of information from the early antiquarians that were actually quite good at recording and writing down what they found. So I used a lot of the information from them, and really intriguingly, where the elongated ones were buried is on the Salisbury Plain, and where the really interesting finds are, it's all a no-go area. You can't visit those long barrows because you're on military ground, and you can just go by archaeological reports or antiquarian reports.
Yeah, and we also know that you're familiar with Brian Forster's work, so how similar the elongated skulls found by Brian is to the UK elongated skulls?
I think the Paracas skulls are, more dramatic looking, and they're more like cone heads. They're much longer than they were in the UK. That is for sure. They are very, very unique. But nonetheless, in England, in Malta, and in Egypt, and France, and in Prague, I was reading the other day an old report about a long barrow from Prague that had an elongated skull, which is supposed to be in the Prague Museum. I'm going to Prague or with the tour in March, so I hope to check that out if possible. So I think they were quite, they're quite widely spread across Europe, but they were not as conehead or as elongated as the Paracas skulls.
Yeah, another thing is very interesting that Brian Forster talks about these skulls, and he says that those skulls were having, red hair, and also we know that in UK there is some feature of people having red hairs, especially in Irish regions. So how you think is that correlating here?
Well, it is very, very interesting. There is a link there. I really do feel that the old culture of Europe, not just necessarily the UK and France and other places, because England was part of Europe for a long time. It was only in 6000 BC that the Doggerland in between England and France became underwater. So there would have been a far more a sense of community, I feel, instead of England being this maverick island over one side. I don't think that was its history at all. So I think it was quite connected to European mainland, and the elongated culture would have spread across Europe. And I really feel that the ancient British peoples from this part of the world may have even influenced other parts of the world. We're always seeing that it's the East that's influenced the West, but I think equally so, the West has influenced the East as well in the growing and influencing of cultures.
Yeah.
Definitely. Wow.
Yeah, very interesting.
Such an amount of information and evidence and great information here. It's really
Yeah.
closing a lot of themes for me that we have been working on with the shows. There's a lot of answers here presented. Wow.
Yeah,
Just
and
kind of,
opening too.
yeah. Yeah, and it just keeps going. Exactly. Well, one thing that I would like to ask you, if you're comfortable with it, is we have this thing of the I just put it right out there, flat Earth movement all around, and I would just like to ask if you have a view about it, if you could share that with us and how it could relate to, with your research, if at all, and how the whole theme of geomancy, ley lines and that kind of
Mythology.
stuff, mythology, kind of actually, could make at least a point that what we're being told is bogus, and we need to take a serious, deeper look here. What do you think about that?
I think all different sorts of concept needs good research. That's always my stance. Look into something and evaluate it and see where the evidence takes you, and see where your feelings and your hunches and your left and right brain take you. I'm not sure if it is a flat Earth or not, to be truthful, because I haven't researched that. In terms of the kind of Earth's energy system, what the Druids of England always said was, it's literally a global system. So one line over here influences another part of the world. So I feel, the Earth itself is interlaced with a lot of different types of energy lines, but as above and so below. So if you put that out to like on a solar system level, could it be that the planets communicate to one another with these linear lines of force? And so, but as for your question about the flat Earth, to be truthful, I really don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's just out there, and it's there's some compelling information that at least suggests that, as I said, things how it's presented to us are not truthful. So, um, I think we just got to be open to kind of, like you said, investigate things deeper and combine the fields of investigation, like we're trying to do here with the show and so many others, of course, and make sense of it that way. If you look at it, I'm not quite sure if you may be familiar with the primer fields and whatnot, uh, where, even if you look out and look at our solar system or galaxies, they kind of look flat like a disk, and the presentation with the primer fields was that there are forces, that's where two forces come together and kind of build that plate in the middle. It's also a portal and whatnot. So I think it's much bigger than we can grasp just yet. In everything, every investigation, every uh, corner of that is valuable here, I think.
Oh, exactly. And to a certain degree, we're spoon-fed what we should be, what we're told to believe, aren't we? We're constantly being spoon-fed and drip-fed. Life is like this. This is what you should have, and So I think when we think outside of the box, when we strive to look at the whole picture and the bigger picture, that's where the truth and reality comes into it. And I think if we as researchers, and I mean, you're doing a great service because you're putting information out to people, if we always stay in our truth and our integrity, I think that leads to putting out the energy for people to understand the ancient mysteries and to investigate it themselves.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and we don't have to bond ourselves by ourselves. So just to go investigate, question everything, question authority, question nature, question history, everything.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit there, and I didn't hear that, but yes, I heard the tail end. Sorry.
Oh.
Well, we just want to express, how much euphoria we have about this
Mhm.
outcome of this show, because you just actually brought so many things together that we've touched in previous shows, and it's really great to see a fusion of the information that comes together. It's I think it's really so many things that you have touched on here that you know, I'll take a deeper look and listen to the show plenty more times, I believe. So we would just like to thank you so much from our heart to join us here today and share all this great knowledge with us. And we hope we can do that again sometime soon.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a pleasure speaking to you both. You're both very knowledgeable and you're both very good at getting some good answers out of me. So I thank you both for inviting me and being a part of this show. And I wish you all the luck for the future. And please have me back at some time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining. Much love.
Well, let's just smile. Thanks, Mariah. Speak soon.
Okay, take care then.
Bye.
We all want to see, we all want to be real, and we're searching when we're finding. We all want to feel the taste of belief, and we search for directions where we meet with our fears. We all want to steer, we want to appear, even in the highest battle, face the enemy. Do you feel the grace of fear? There is no need to disappear. Just stay here and get clear. Grace of fear, there is no need to disappear. Just stay